Good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. My name is Nao Takeuchi, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on financing a just transition in the plastic value chain, hosted by the Global Partnership on Plastic Pollution and Marine Litter in collaboration with GRID-Arendal and International Alliance of Waste Pickers. As plastic pollution continues to be one of our most pressing environmental challenges, it is really critical to highlight how financing and establishment of fair and inclusive plastic circular economy, including all the actors, informal waste workers, cooperatives, small and medium-sized enterprises, and municipal service providers. Today, we'll explore financial strategies that enable a just transition in the plastic value chain with global experts highlighting case studies from Brazil, India, and in South Africa on how we can make this transition just and equitable. So before going into the webinar, I'd like to show how to access the interpretation for your preferred languages. So there's an icon on interpretation on the bottom of the bar at this Zoom link, and please click and find your preferred language from there. And the next slide, please. There's a little bit of technical issues of our Zoom link, so this is a little bit disclaimer. And due to the Zoom limited support for custom interpretation languages, some languages have been mapped to alternative Zoom channels. So participants are kindly requested to select the following channel to access interpretation in the preferred language. So if you prefer Kannada language, then please go to Korean channel, Swahili for Russian channel, Marathi for Japanese channel, Bahasa Indonesia to Chinese channel, and Bengali for German channel. And we appreciate your understanding and cooperation on this. And then apologies for this inconvenience, but please bear with us for this. And then also thank you for being with us. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Frederick Haag from the International Maritime Organization as a co-chair of GPML Steering Committee to deliver the opening remark. Frederick, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Global Partnership on Plastic Pollution and Marine Litters webinar on financing a just transition in the plastic value chain. My name is Frederick Haag. I'm the co-chair of the GPML alongside Sarah Da Silva from Environment Climate Change Canada. And it is my pleasure to provide brief opening remarks for today's webinar. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and the presentations will be sent to you all afterwards. The GPML is the largest global multi-stakeholder partnership, bringing together governments, civil society, academia, and the private sector to address public pollution and marine litter. The partnership is led by a steering committee, and the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, provides secretariat services. Before we start, allow me to share a few updates from the GPML. We are pleased to announce that we have welcomed the Vietnam Agency of Seas and Islands, VASI, to the GPML Steering Committee, and that the regional nodes will be represented by the South Asia Cooperative Environment Programme, SASEP, taking over from the Mediterranean Action Plan. We also encourage non-governmental entities who have been GPML members for at least a year to express their interest in joining the steering committee by sending an email to the GPML Secretariat. Colleagues will share more information in the chat. We're also excited to announce that the GPML digital platform will be relaunched as the Global Plastics Hub on World Environment Day. The Global Plastics Hub is the largest global multi-stakeholder platform on plastics that is open source and crowdsourced. It provides access to technical resources, connects stakeholders, and integrates data to guide action. I understand, I encourage you all to visit and sign up to the Global Plastics Hub to showcase your work. The next GPML webinar on 29th of May will mark a pre-launch to introduce some of the new features of the hub. So please do join us then. For today's webinar, we have a rich and insightful agenda ahead with a range of expert voices and grassroots perspectives. We will begin with a keynote address from Natalie Harms from UNEP on what it means to move toward a just transition in the plastics value chain. Following that, Emmy Nøkleby from the Norwegian Institute for Water Research, NIVA, will give an overview of the financial resources required to enable a just transition. Next, we will hear from Shio Jino from UN Habitat, who will present a financial gap analysis of the real costs of implementing a just transition and funding the gaps. Then Maria Zacona from GRID-Arendal will take us through key lessons learned from case studies of just transition implementation. We will then hear the voices from the ground, featuring perspectives from the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, who will share real-world experiences from Brazil, with Anderson Nassif of ANCAT, from India, with Abhay Bachuka and Sarika Kishir Sagar of Swatch Coop, from South Africa, with Eva Mokoena and Mantoa Kwali of ARO, as well as Taylor Cass Talbot from the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. After that, we'll move on to panel discussion, moderated by Swati Singh Sambyal of GRID-Arendal, focused on advancing sustainable financing for just transition for plastics action. The panel will feature Kunapong Kunaraksa, Senior Director at the Circulate Initiative, Ashish Chaturvedi, Head of UNEP India, Mike Webster, Director at Systemic, Christina Jager from the Yunus Environment Hub, and Emmy Nøkleby from NIVA. We will then open the floor for a Q&A session so you can engage directly with our speakers before we close with a summary by our moderator. With that, I thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to a dynamic and insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick, for the insightful and an interesting opening remark. Next, I'd like to give floor to Natalie Harms from UNEP for a keynote speech. Natalie, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Now, and thank you, Frederick. Welcome, everyone, to this GPML webinar, and thank you for joining us today for this important conversation on finance for a just transition in the context of plastic pollution. My name is Natalie. I lead the plastic pollution work in the Ecosystems Division of UNEP. We're all here today because we recognize that addressing the plastic pollution crisis is not just about environmental action, it's also a matter of social equity. Reversing plastic pollution in a way that safeguards the rights of both present and future generations demands urgent, coordinated action, and it must be fair and inclusive. The concept of a just transition is central to this. It calls for ensuring that the shift toward more sustainable systems respects the rights, the livelihoods, and well-being of all people involved, especially those in vulnerable and marginalized positions. And in recent discussions, the just transition has often been closely associated with the informal sector, particularly informal waste workers and waste pickers. And rightfully so, they play a critical, often under-recognized role in plastic waste management and in recycling, particularly in many low and middle-income countries. They're often most affected by plastic pollution and face many systemic and economic challenges, such as limited access to social protection, poor working conditions, and inconsistent incomes. Ensuring that their voices are heard, their rights protected, and their livelihoods supported is an essential part of building an inclusive future. That said, we also want to use this moment to broaden the conversation. A truly just transition must include the entire plastics value chain, formal and informal sectors alike. Fairness means ensuring that no group is overlooked and that social equity and dialogue are embedded in policy design and implementation at every level. Today's webinar will explore how innovative financial strategies can drive equitable solutions, ensuring no worker, formal or informal, is left behind. We will focus in more depth on good practices for engaging and supporting informal waste workers, particularly waste pickers, with real-life observations from Brazil, India, and South Africa. And these case studies are available on the GPML Global Plastics Hub that Frederick just mentioned. And I encourage you all to sign up to the hub and showcase your solutions and community-driven initiatives. At the same time, we hope this session helps to open up a wider ongoing dialogue about what a just transition truly means in the plastics context, and how we can design approaches that are holistic, inclusive, and equitable for all workers and communities and actors across the value chain. As we look to the broader international context, it is important to note the ongoing negotiations by the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, or INC. The latest version of the chair's text includes references to a just transition for all, including waste pickers. And while it is important to remember that outcomes of this member state-led process are yet to be determined, this provides useful context for the dialogue on a just transition. So as the UNEP Executive Director recently highlighted, the collective effort to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, will require inclusive approaches that consider the social dimensions of the transition. Today's webinar contributes to that ongoing conversation by exploring practices and experiences related to informal waste workers within the wider context of enabling fair and inclusive change for all. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to the discussions ahead. Back to you now.
Thank you, Natalie, for your comprehensive intervention and important points. So now I'd like to move on to a presentation from Emmy Neukelby, a research scientist at the Norwegian Institute for Water and Research. Her research focuses on just transitions of informal recycling systems and global efforts to end plastic pollution. She is a lead author of the report Leaving No One Behind, published in 2022, delving into how the Global Plastic Treaty enables just transition of informal waste sector. She will make a presentation on overview of financial resources for just transition in the plastic value chain. Emmy, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Noel, and thank you for having me here today. So today I'll share an overview of financing options and key justice dimensions in ongoing efforts to end plastic pollution, focusing particularly on just transition considerations downstream in the plastic value chain. And this presentation draws on my authorship in the UN Habitat and NEVA report on the same topic, as well as following the plastics treaty negotiations for the last 3 years. Next slide, please. And as treaty talks continue, the question of how we finance the just transition to end plastic pollution is becoming more urgent. Finance has become one of the most contested issues in the treaty negotiations. And as with other global agreements on climate, biodiversity, and chemicals, a lack of accessible and predictable funding, often rooted in a reluctance to commit resources, has delayed implementation and weakened overall ambition. Poorly designed finance can cause real harm to people and communities on the front lines of plastic pollution, like informal waste workers and under-resourced communities. Many low and middle-income countries face rising waste management costs, limited infrastructure, and constrained public budgets. Without dedicated and accessible financing, they cannot meet the obligations envisioned under the Plastics Treaty. Financial resources are not only needed for improving waste management systems, but also for upstream measures such as reducing plastic production, redesigning products, and shifting towards reuse systems. And these upstream measures are not only cost-effective, but they can also contribute to reduce the social and environmental harm affecting frontline communities managing waste, such as waste pickers. Next slide, please. Waste pickers collect around 60% of all recycled post-consumer plastic waste worldwide. In many low and middle income countries, they are the backbone of plastic recovery systems. Yet, despite their essential contributions, they work under unsafe and insecure conditions with low and stable incomes, limited protective equipment, and little access to labor rights and social protections. They're often excluded from the very funding reforms meant to improve plastic recovery systems. A just transition must do more than avoid harm. It must actively invest in securing and strengthening the livelihoods of informal workers. Failing to do so risks entrenching inequalities and weakening the impact of plastic pollution policies. Next slide, please. To meaningfully support informal workers and ensure that plastic pollution strategies are both just and effective, we need to understand what kinds of financial support are needed on the ground and within institutions. Field evidence show that a just transition for waste pickers requires financing for basic equipment and infrastructure suited for informal operations, stable and fair pay that reflects the value of their work, access to social protections such as healthcare and pension, recognition and access to materials and markets, and participation in decision-making and governance. Finance is also needed for ensuring that local authorities have the adequate tools and resources to meaningfully include informal workers in service delivery and decision-making. This is not just about compensation. It's about investing in systems that already work and building the institutional foundations to make them increasingly safe, equitable, and scalable. Next slide, please. So what funding streams currently exist to support countries and communities in tackling plastic pollution? We see a range of established and emerging financial mechanisms used in various contexts. These have the potential to mobilize resources and scale solutions, but many face barriers to delivering equitable and inclusive outcomes that support a just transition. Public and multilateral funds play a key role, but they're often complex, bureaucratic, and difficult for local actors to access, particularly for informal workers. Market-based mechanisms such as plastic credits and blended finance can attract private capital, but they've also proven volatile, costly to access, and often fail to benefit those doing the actual recovery work. EPR systems aim to make producers pay for plastic recovery, but in many cases, we see that they fail to recognize or support those that are already doing the work, such as waste pickers, and can displace them by capturing the most valuable waste streams, leaving less valuable uncollected fractions behind. Domestic public funding is essential for building local systems, but limited budgets and capacity often mean underfunded services that overlook informal actors. These funding streams offer opportunities, but without careful design, they risk reinforcing exclusion rather than supporting a just transition. Next slide, please. And beyond the funding sources themselves, we also need to look closely at how financing is framed and delivered. Poorly designed finance can lock in harmful technologies like incineration and chemical recycling. It can prioritize efficiency over inclusion, excluding those outside of formal systems. And it can deepen existing inequalities, especially where informal workers lack recognition and protection. But it doesn't have to be this way. Justice-orientated financing models exist, and they can offer valuable lessons for designing more inclusive and equitable financial mechanisms. For example, small grant windows, such as those supported by the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Programme, can be structured to enable waste picker cooperatives and community actors to access funding directly or through trusted intermediaries. And the Green Climate Fund is linking access to funding with participatory design, gender equality, and social safeguards, as outlined in its gender and Indigenous peoples policies. And these examples show that inclusion and equity can be built into financial design, not just in terms of who receives the funding, but also in terms of how decisions are made and governed. And it may also offer valuable lessons for shaping a treaty-based financial mechanism that's more responsive to the needs of those most affected by plastic pollution. Ultimately, it's not just about making funding available, but about creating the right conditions for it to drive inclusive and lasting change. Next slide. And this is where the Plastics Treaty presents a critical opportunity. We see that a growing number of countries, including from the African Group, GRULAC, and Pacific Island states, are calling for a new standalone financial mechanism under the treaty. Their vision is for a fund that offers predictable, accessible, and equitable support, particularly for countries and communities with the fewest resources. And reflecting on the justice considerations mentioned earlier, such a mechanism could also enable direct access for local governments, waste picker organizations, and frontline communities. And it could strengthen social safeguards and accountability structures to ensure funding supports just, inclusive, and community-led solutions. Next slide, please. So to close, I'd like to leave you with 3 key reflections. First, there is no just transition without just finance. Waste pickers are not only central to plastic recovery, they're innovators in reuse, repair, and composting, and small-scale manufacturing. With the right financial support, they can drive local reuse systems, lead door-to-door collection systems, and create value-added products from recyclables. Finance must recognize and support this work as essential to inclusive and effective transitions. Secondly, finance must be tailored to the needs and realities of affected communities. That means simplifying access, co-designing solutions, and offering long-term structural support, not just short-term pilots or top-down interventions. And lastly, financial mechanisms must align with the treaty's ambition. If the treaty aims to reduce plastic production, protect human health, and promote a just transition, then its financial architecture must be built to deliver on that ambition. Finance isn't just a technical detail, it's a justice issue, and it will determine whether this treaty succeeds in delivering real, inclusive, and lasting change. And while many of these financial discussions remain largely high level, what really matters is how it's felt on the ground, who finances reaches, and what it supports. So I'm really looking forward to the next speakers who will bring concrete examples and lived experiences that show what financing for a just transition can actually look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy, for the presentation highlighting key points of different financial sources for just transition, how to make it just and equitable. This is a really great opening. So next, I'd like to move on to another presentation from Shiho Jinno, a waste management specialist from UN Habitat, with over 9 years of experience in waste management and environmental education across the world. She leads an African Clean Cities program with a strong focus on SDG Indicator 11.6.1, measuring the proportion municipal solid waste properly managed in cities. Today, we will see an interesting findings from the monitoring municipal solid waste management system and its financial situation in cities in Africa. Shiho, over to you.
Thank you now for the introduction, and then hi all. Thank you very much for inviting us for this webinar. So my presentation is about financial gap analysis and the cost of the just transition with a special focus on the African context. Next slide, please. Let me quickly introduce our initiative called African Clean Cities Platform. So African Clean Cities Platform was established in 2017 with the support of Japanese government. And then we have two decision-making body, which one is ACCP Assembly, and then the other one is a steering committee. At this moment, UN Habitat is hosting the ACCP Secretariat function. And we also have another membership called ACCP Associate Members. Basically consist of the multilateral, bilateral donors and the other regional institutions or financial institutions. Together with all, we are supporting the ACCP member countries and then cities. Now we have 198 member cities from 47 African countries. The business model of the African Clean Cities Platform, we always start from getting the SDG 11.6.1 monitoring data so that we can get the impact on the ground through data analysis, local stakeholders consultations, and the code project development with the cities and the other potential donors. Next slide, please. This is the about waste-wise cities tool we use for the operational policy and the financing gap analysis. The tool is basically, it is a monitoring methodology of SDG indicator 11.6.1, proportion of municipal solid waste collected and managed in controlled facilities out of total municipal solid waste generated by city. If you apply this tool, the city can identify how much of municipal solid waste is generated, collected, and treated in controlled facilities. As you can see right above, the one of the sample or results of the worked application is like this. And then the right below image is showing waste, plastic waste leakage. So we have also supplementary tool, which is a waste flow diagram. So if you use this tool, you can find how much of plastic waste is generated by the city and then how many percentage of them are leaking to the environment, including the water bodies and rivers and oceans. Next slide, please. So after the worked waste-wise cities tool application, we usually organize local stakeholders workshop to identify policy and then infrastructure investment areas of improvement. This is a sample of Mombasa County government, which is a secondary city of Kenya. And one of their improvement area includes the registration and the licensing of waste collection groups and other informal waste and recovery sectors. Next slide, please. As Amy introduced, UN Habitat and NEVA together, we launched a report, Leaving No One Behind. And then in this report, the report addresses the aspects of just transition, particularly focusing on the informal waste and the recovery sector. Although it does not provide specific cost analysis or detailed financial estimates related to implementing just transition, some critical components which necessary for just a transition is provided. So first one is the report is emphasizing on social and economic inclusion, such as official recognition, legal protections, access to social services, fair compensations. So these are related to the informal sector's status and the living condition. Then the second one is a need for investment in infrastructure and services, including investments in infrastructure, of course, healthcare service scheme, and then social services. This is sort of like working environment improvement or working conditions. And the report also say like it can be acquired, that the cost, the finance for just transition can be acquired directly through a global instrument or through EPL schemes, or sometimes international financial institutions support or funds, or innovative financing mechanisms. Also, maybe from within the municipal solid waste management system. However, when we see the municipal solid waste management system's financial situation, we did some financial analysis. Maybe next slide, please. So we did a financial gap analysis in some of the African countries and the cities. So here is the table, which is showing how much of money is spent on per ton of waste collected, and how much of money is spent on per ton of waste generated in each of the listed cities. As you can see, the average of these cities are 31 USD is spent for 1 ton of waste collected, and 90 USD is spent on 1 ton of waste generated to manage them in their cities. However, the World Bank's Water Waste 2.0 report provides typical cost of collection, transfer, and controlled disposal or sanitary landfill for those countries with different income levels, like lower to middle income countries, indicating they required from 45 to 115 US dollar per ton of waste is actually needed. This means that the financial resources entering the waste sector in these cities would need to be doubled or even tripled, or maybe it should be carefully planned and distributed so that they can expand and properly collect the waste and also manage or operate the facilities in a controlled manner. However, at the same time, this indicated that the local authorities or cities where capacity and resources are scarce had no space to address other activities, including just transition within their resources at this moment. Next slide, please. This slide is showing global estimate of SDG indicator 1161 monitoring. So as you see, in sub-Saharan Africa, 85% of waste generated is mismanaged. But I want to imply with this slide is I mentioned the 31 USD is spent for 1 ton of waste collected, and the 90 USD is spent on 1 ton of waste generated. So which means this money are used to collect around 50% of waste generated in sub-Saharan Africa, and also spent on to openly dump the waste or to manage 85% of waste in uncontrolled facilities. So to address the cost of just transition, cities need to further increase their budget allocations for effective waste management and for supporting the efforts of the informal sector. However, this shouldn't be viewed exclusively as the responsibility of the cities, but it also must be seen as a shared responsibility among all stakeholders. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiho, for a very interesting presentation. So it sounds like a financial situation at the municipal government in, for example, Africa might not be really catered for the just transition, and then those financial resources has lots of challenges for financing just transition. Thank you so much for interesting findings. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Marietta Sakona, a senior expert in waste management and marine litter from GRID-Arendal with over 13 years of experience in solid waste and resource management. Today, she will introduce key lessons learned from a newly published 3 countries case studies from Brazil, India, and South Africa. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Nao. Thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, this presentation will look at how 3 countries, and if you can please share the presentation as well, 3 countries, Brazil, India, and South Africa, have worked to support the informal waste workers through their just transition. Thanks for that. So we'll start with the case study that is coming from Brazil. If you can go to the next slide. Brazil is a leading example regarding the legal recognition and inclusion of workers of the informal waste sector at national frameworks related to waste management, as well as an example of integration of the informal recycle sector into municipal waste management systems. In Brazil, waste picking officially recognized in 2002 in the Brazilian classification of occupation, bringing a lot of benefits for thousands of the workers of the sector, advising labor rights, providing access to social security, and among others, encourage municipalities to work formally with waste pickers cooperatives. A significant milestone has been the inclusion of waste pickers cooperatives in Law 12-305 in 2010. This law established the Brazilian national policy on solid waste. It supports shared responsibility among all the different stakeholders, including government, the private sector, and the waste pickers. It highly encourages integrations of waste pickers in the reserve logistics systems for packaging, and that is a kind of an EPR system. It also entitles waste pickers to have contracts with the municipality and the private sector and paid by them for the service that they are providing. Furthermore, the law enhances access to financial incentives like credits, income tax deductions, and others. But for the informal sector to gain the legal recognition, it was a lot to be done. And the waste pickers movement have played a crucial role in promoting legal recognition of waste of the waste pickers. This has been taking place since the 90s. But again, the implementation remains uneven. Although waste pickers have been legally recognized, the effective implementation of the policies in Brazil depends a lot on the commitment of the municipalities and the governments and the extent to which these laws are enforced. Therefore, we have seen that only 10% of the municipalities have currently contracts with waste pickers cooperatives. And this is due to the insufficient technical and institutional capacity of many of the municipalities in addressing the solid waste management challenges. Furthermore, the insufficient municipal budget for waste management systems in Brazil. Another challenge, it is related to the way the fee paid by producers to the producer responsibility organizations within the reverse logistics systems are calculated. We've seen that there is no clear guidance of how to incorporate the real cost of labor and other operational costs. And this, in many cases, have led to underpaid workers of the sector. On the top of that, the financial incentives that has been enhanced with a specific law of 2010 has in many cases been challenged by many factors, including fluctuating market prices for recyclables. Moving to the next slide, and the next case study is that next example comes from India. It is the Swatch Pune cooperative model. I'm not going to provide a lot of details in this case study because I know the next speakers from Swatch Pune will provide more detailed information. Just to say that this is an excellent example of how waste pickers getting organized can enhance their own just transition by empowering, enhancing the capacities of their members, providing social and economic support, and advocating for their rights, including policy making and decision-making processes. What makes Swatch model unique is the fact that they're cooperative that has almost 4,000 waste pickers, mainly women, have made a partnership with Pune municipality under a memorandum of understanding that was in 2002, demonstrating collaboration, and also the MOU has been able to verify the role and the responsibilities of the members of the partnership. In this model, the members of Swatch cooperative, they are not city employees. And this is unique. They run their own service and paid a service fee directly from the household. And in this way, they are directly establishing relationships with the citizens. They have access to recyclables and access to public buildings. The municipality also, through this MOU, supplies personal protective equipment as well as collection equipment to the members, to the Swatch member. It also provides this in cases medical, life, and accident insurance. The direct benefits of this model, it is that it contributes at a low cost waste management for the city of Pune. It has improved the effectiveness of recovery of recyclables. And furthermore, it has enhanced women's waste pickers' integration into the local waste management system. For the waste pickers, of course, there has been a significant increase in their incomes and their livelihoods. In some cases, the income has increased fivefold. But again, there are challenges in this model. I would say that the main challenge has been the fact that this agreement between the Swatch Pune and the municipality is a short term. It has to be renewed every 5 years, and sometimes in the past has not been renewed, putting the works of the waste pickers and their livelihoods at risk. Furthermore, private companies from time to time have attempted to enter in contracts with Pune municipality, adding an extra layer of risk. That is with the India case studies in brief. Again, the next speakers will provide more insight. We're moving to the third case study that it comes from South Africa. This is a case study that focused on the inclusion of waste pickers, reclaimers in South Africa in the extended production responsibility policy. South Africa has implemented a mandatory EPR since 2021, ensuring that producers are accountable for their products' end of life. In theory, this puts informal workers at the center of the recycling programs. The EPR policy requires, in this case, producers to integrate informal waste pickers into their collection schemes, actually working directly with the waste pickers, and pay the waste pickers who are registered in the National Registration Database for the collection services they provide and the environmental benefits they bring. And that is called the service fee, calculated according to the amount of waste collected and sold by the waste pickers. It also allows producers to develop platforms in order to track the recyclables that waste pickers collect and sell. What's notable is that the successful development of policy and legislation around the EPR was based on a multi-stakeholder participatory approach. And it has been important that the informal recycling sector has been advocating from the very beginning to be included and be active in both the waste management policies and the programs. We have South African Waste Pickers Association and African Reclaimers Organizations, two main waste pickers associations in South Africa that have played a key role in developing the waste pickers integration guidelines. That was important for the EPR, and also the establishment of South Africa Waste Pickers Registration System. Again, the implementation, it wasn't that smooth. The service fee for the waste pickers is considered by the associations very low. There is a small portion of waste pickers that they are receiving this service fee. And according to the public sector, there is a great complexity of the financial transactions. And in this sense, we need to reach an agreement of how we calculate the service fee, how we provide it to the waste speakers, and how we link this fee to the registration system, how we pay them through the registration system.
Maria, please wrap up, sorry.
I'm coming to my next slide. That is the key lessons, the common, let's say, key lessons from these three case studies. So we have seen first that the mobilization at the grassroots level has been essential for driving the meaningful policy changes and ensuring the workers have a say in the decision that impacts them. The second is that defining legal roles and contracts is crucial for the sustainable integration of informal workers in the formal systems. Third, we need to develop financing strategies that support the livelihoods of waste pickers and that will take into account the realities of these peoples to ensure their economic sustainability and stability. And finally, and most important, we need to invest in the local capacity and infrastructures of the municipalities. And this is fundamental for any successful implementation of initiatives, policies, and programs that they aim to integrate and improving workers' conditions in the waste management sector. And I'm finishing just with a last slide saying that in overall, we need to create supportive ecosystems for the informal recycling sector. And I know we don't have any more time, so thank you very much for your attention.
Sorry, thank you so much for your very interesting presentation highlighting the key successes and challenges on the ground in Brazil and in India, also South Africa. Very much interesting. Now I would like to move on to the next Voices from the Ground, Brazil, India, and South Africa by International Alliance of Waste Pickers. I'd like to invite Anderson Nassif from ANCAT, National Association of Waste Pickers and Pickers of Recyclables Materials in Brazil. Abhay Bachuka and Sarika Kshilsagad from Swatch Corp India, and then Eva Nemantoa from African Reclaimers Organization in South Africa. We also would like to invite Ms. Taylor Cass-Talbot for introducing 3 case studies on our Global Plastics Hub. Anderson, over to you.
Muito bom dia, é um prazer enorme poder participar desse importante webinar. Eu acho que são oportunidades como essa que a gente pode avançar, inclusive no aspecto aí da transição justa, né? E aqui muito atento às apresentações anteriores, né? Não trouxe aqui uma apresentação específica, mas vou narrar um pouquinho daquilo que é a experiência do Brasil, né? E começo aqui dizendo para todos, né, que sou catador de materiais recicláveis há mais de 20 anos, iniciei na catação no antigo lixão da minha cidade, e após o encerramento do lixão, conseguimos aí com os outros companheiros fundar uma cooperativa que irá completar em agosto desse ano 20 anos desde a sua fundação. Eu gostaria de primeiramente abordar aqui uma questão extremamente importante, né? A gente tem uma lei de 2010, a Lei 12.305, até citada aqui em apresentação anterior. É uma lei que a gente entende que foi construída e teve a participação dos catadores. Eu, inclusive, participante de algumas discussões dessa lei. E a lei traz ali aspectos importantes, principalmente aquilo que diz respeito à priorização dos catadores, nos modelos em que envolve a gestão de resíduo nos municípios. Porém, isso ainda não é algo que deveria ser a regra, e em alguns municípios acaba por ser uma exceção. Mas eu queria destacar aqui a participação dos catadores, principalmente na coleta dos plásticos, né? Foi trazido aqui também em apresentações anteriores que 60% são coletados aí pelos catadores, e aí eu trago aqui uma amplitude a nível de Brasil, estudos realizados, né, num tempo passado, demonstrou que 90% das embalagens pós-consumo passam pela mão dos catadores, né? Nós, como agentes primários dessa cadeia, embora estejamos numa pirâmide invertida, né? Ou seja, primariamente somos aqueles que mais colocam a mão nos resíduos, principalmente pós-consumo, porém, para fins econômicos, financeiros, somos aqueles que menos recebem, né? E aí eu cito aqui o que menos recebe, tanto aquelas organizações formais, mas mais crítico ainda aqueles trabalhadores que estão na informalidade, né? Aí ficam realmente à mercê do mercado da reciclagem, que já oscila bastante, mas também refém de uma certa exploração que acontece, e a gente não pode negar esse fato. Queria ressaltar aqui que no âmbito do plástico, o desejo nosso, enquanto catadores, obviamente, é receber pelo serviço que a gente presta, de alta relevância. Não somos aqui a favor de ter uma abundância cada vez mais de plástico circulando no nosso país. É o contrário disso, né? E aí, essa relação é tão cruel conosco, porque, por vezes, dá a entender que os catadores, né, precisam necessariamente de uma quantidade gigantesca de plástico circulando para que ele obtenha a sua renda, né? Pelo contrário, a gente é em prol daquilo que diz a própria Política Nacional de Resíduos, que é a não geração, a redução, a reutilização, a reciclagem. Porém, como entes mais frágeis dessa cadeia, obviamente, o plástico acaba por ter um peso financeiro importante no ato da operação de coleta, triagem e comercialização. Gostaríamos muito que essa transição fosse de fato justa, e trago aqui dados importantes também. O país acabou por avançar em alguns regulamentos importantes, principalmente no que diz respeito à logística reversa, mas faço aqui um parênteses também, e aí uma crítica extremamente construtiva de que a logística reversa ela não pode perder o seu viés daquilo que é originário da própria política nacional. Ou seja, é a responsabilidade compartilhada, e no caso da logística reversa tem um papel importante as empresas que colocam essas embalagens no mercado. E a logística reversa, no nosso entendimento, enquanto ANCAT, Movimento Nacional dos Catadores, Unicatadores, não pode ser ou não pode partir do princípio simplesmente mercadológico. Ou seja, a logística reversa é um instrumento da política nacional que tem sim o seu papel econômico, mas tem fundamentalmente o seu papel social também, que versa sobre nós catadores. De outro modo, o país também enfrenta, obviamente, um desafio gigantesco, né? Um país de dimensões continentais não é para menos, né? Os desafios são gigantescos. E na área de resíduos, isso é fato real. Eu acho que há uma necessidade gigantesca de maiores investimentos, principalmente para a cadeia que envolve os catadores. A gente sabe que investimentos pontuais acabam por atingir aquelas organizações que têm a melhor estrutura, a melhor capacidade, e deixa para trás aqueles que de fato mais necessitam. Não que essas organizações formais, em decorrência da luta, da resistência, alcançaram outro nível, um outro patamar, não necessite. Mas eu acho que o país tem que avançar e ter olhares, principalmente, para aqueles que estão hoje nas ruas, de maneira informal, contribuindo consideravelmente para a cadeia de resíduos do país e precisam imediatamente serem valorizados. Eu acho que o país precisa utilizar do instrumento legal que, no nosso entendimento, foi construído com a nossa participação, mas somente ter o instrumento legal, de modo que não consiga implementar na sua raiz a participação e a priorização de nós catadores, acaba por ter um instrumento que, no nosso entendimento, não saiu literalmente ou aquilo que deveria sair do papel. Alguns movimentos que a gente tem feito, eu acho que é de suma importância, né? Principalmente a ANCAT, tem desencadeado alguns projetos, alguns processos, pensando literalmente naqueles catadores autônomos, né? Que estão principalmente nas ruas do país. Para tanto, a gente lançou recentemente 6.
Anderson, please wrap up. Sorry.
Sim, a gente lançou 6 projetos denominados Conexão Cidadã, que é para trazer dignidade para esses catadores autônomos, né? Estamos em algumas regiões do país, inclusive na data de hoje, fazendo um lançamento no estado da Bahia, e ao mesmo tempo a ANCAT também tem um projeto denominado Valoriza, que é a conexão daquelas cooperativas formais, trazendo os catadores informais para também usufruírem aí de todos os benefícios, né? Principalmente de venda conjunta, pagamento pelo serviço prestado, pagamento de logística reversa, fazendo com que esses cidadãos invisíveis se tornem, obviamente, visíveis aí aos olhos da sociedade brasileira. Então, a gente está caminhando para bons exemplos, mas a gente sabe do tamanho do desafio. E é para isso que a gente luta há mais de 25 anos como a ANCAT, né, que teve a sua fundação lá nos anos 2000 e continua lutando aí para valorização e priorização dos catadores em qualquer arranjo que diz respeito à cadeia de resíduos. E lutamos, obviamente, por uma logística que remunere de maneira justa, a tonelada justa, e ao mesmo tempo também que todo o serviço prestado pelos catadores passem essencialmente pela sua remuneração e valorização desse serviço prestado e tão nobre para toda a nossa sociedade brasileira. Seria isso e desde já agradeço a oportunidade.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to the speakers from India.
Thank you, now. Can we begin with the slideshow? Thank you. And thank you, Maria, for summing up my presentation very well. So I'm Abhay Bachchuka, and along with me is our board member guest speaker, Sarika Shirsagar. Next slide, please. So today, Swachh is an organization of more than 3,700 waste pickers, most of whom are women from the lowest classes, and most of them are illiterate. And the waste pickers reach every door, every day, and they essentially run a cooperative in a democratic fashion. And while doing so, they end up recycling 35% of all the dry waste that's collected in the city of Pune, India. Next, please. Sarika?
गुड इव्हनिंग. मी सारिका बोलते. माझी संघटना म्हणजे मी रोडवरच भंगार वेचत होते. तर त्यावेळेला काय ओळख ही नव्हती आमची. कोण पाठीवर पोतं घेऊन भंगार वेचत होते. त्यावेळेला काय ओळख नव्हती. ज्यावेळेला केपीपी म्हणून संघटना ओपन केली आम्ही 1993 मध्ये. त्याच्यानंतर केपीपी मध्ये भंगार गोळा करायचं विकायचं हे चालू होतं. 1 मिनिट. भंगार गोळा सॉरी 1996 साली 93 साली संघटना ओपन केली केपीपी म्हणून. नंतर 1993 साली संघटना ओपन केल्यानंतर भंगार वेचत होतो हे करत. आणि त्याच्यानंतर 1900 सॉरी असं कसं त्यांना स्वतःचा रोजगार आहे त्यांना मी माईक बंद केलं, कॅमेरा बंद केला. 1996 मध्ये संघटना ओपन केली. त्यावेळेला
Sarika,
आयडी कार्ड दिलं म्हणजे
can we please move on to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So in Pune, the waste collection takes place in 2 stages. The first stage is where the waste pickers of Swachh go door to door and they collect the waste. And in the second stage, they remove all the recyclables that they can sell off as scrap, and the rest of the rejects and the wet waste is handed over to the municipal authorities. This leads to a decentralized recycling and reduction of the overall waste. Next slide, please. So had our municipal corporation followed a typical pattern of solid waste management, they would have incurred a cost of around 122 crore rupees, Indian rupees per year, which is approximately 14.28 million rupees per year. Instead, they only have to pay us a sum of 1.78 million per year, which most of it goes towards the administrative expenses, the social welfare schemes that they provide to our waste pickers, the basic equipments and the push carts and the personal protective equipment that our waste pickers need, and the slump subsidy and the push cart maintenance subsidy that they provide. Apart from that, the user fees, our waste pickers mainly earn their livelihoods from the user fees that they receive directly from the citizens. Like Maria mentioned, it establishes a very close link between the citizens and the waste pickers, and which leads to more accountability. Also, our waste pickers have the first right over all the recyclables that they get from the waste. Next slide, please. So Swachh and its sister organizations have been working for a just transition in the following areas, which is social integration and welfare, employment and recycling, and a lot more is still needed. We'll take a look at all of them one by one. Next slide, please. Sarika, there? So in the past, there was no formal recognition to the waste pickers in the country. However, in 1996,
अभय मी बोलू
oh, well,
अभय
yes,
बोलू आम्हाला ओळख अशी काहीच नव्हती. कचरा वेचक म्हणून कोण ओळखत नव्हतं समाजात, किंवा म्हणजे कुठे गेलं तरी आम्हाला ओळखत नव्हतं. पण एक कचरा वेचक म्हणून आम्हाला कुठं जागा नव्हती, स्थान नव्हतं. पण ज्या वेळेला संघटना ओपन केली आणि ज्या वेळेला स्वच्छ म्हणून आम्ही काम करायला लागलो, त्यावेळेला लोक पण ओळखायला लागले की हा बाबा ही स्वच्छची माणसं आहेत. स्वच्छ म्हणून आम्हाला समाजात जागा मिळाली, स्वच्छ म्हणून आयडी मिळाली, आणि एक सामाजिक सुरक्षा म्हणून ज्या योजना आहेत, त्यात विमा, किंवा मुलांना स्कॉलरशिप, पेन्शन, परत मुलांचं शिक्षण, ही ओळख म्हणून आम्हाला सगळ्याच सामाजिक सुरक्षा मिळाल्या. परत पतपेढी म्हणून आम्हाला म्हणजे कचरा वेचक म्हणून कुठे ओळख नव्हती आम्हाला, किंवा कचरा वेचक म्हणून कोण कर्ज देत. तर ते लोन पण आम्हाला, आमचं म्हणणं आहे की आम्हाला कुठं घर घ्यायचं असेल.
I think we can move on to the next slide.
Are we having a little bit of technical problems? Sarika,
Yeah,
do you
looks
think
like
you
it.
can, do you think you can speak? Or shall we, could we also wrap up because the time is a bit running?
Let me wrap it up quickly.
Yes, please, thank you.
Yes. Could you please go to the previous slide, a couple of slides behind? Yeah. Yeah, next one.
पहिलं मी कंटिन्यू करावे.
नाही सारिका ताई, मी बोलतो, आपल्याला लवकर संपवायचं आहे. Yeah, next slide please. So in terms of employment, all the waste pickers who were previously unorganized, they were brought together by a cooperative, and the cooperative has a mid-term or short-term contract with the local body, which provides them authority to collect all the waste, to conduct all the primary collection in the city. The waste pickers previously had no fixed income source, but now they have fixed number of households to which they cater to daily, and they get fixed monthly user fees. They used to work for 12 hours a day, and all days of the week, all 7 days of the week, which has now turned out to be just 6 hours of day, 6 hours per day of work, and they also get a weekly off on Sunday. Next slide, please. Earlier, the waste pickers used to work without safety equipment. Now a lot of part of the safety equipment, major part of the safety equipment, is provided by the municipal corporation and also by the organization. Like I mentioned before, all the waste pickers in the organization have the first right, or all the waste pickers in the country, rather, legally, they have the first right on all the recyclables that they collect from their waste. Next slide, please. In terms of recycling, there used to be many unfair practices, and there used to be quite some uncertainty with respect to the price of the scrap. So we set up our own cooperative scrap shop, which is owned and operated by the waste pickers. Similarly, we have CSR funded mechanisms for multi-layer plastic and also for other kinds of plastic for recycling. Next slide.
Abhay, could you please wrap up because we are running out of time.
Yes, we can move to the last slide in that case. Yeah, this one. The one before, please. Yeah, so there are many challenges, and there's a long way to go in terms of just transition for recycling in plastics and the waste pickers. But most important of them is strengthening all the organizations, the waste picker based organizations, so that individually and collectively strengthening, so that we can truly move towards a just transition. That's it. I'm sorry for taking a lot of time. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting. So we're going to share the presentation later. And then, yeah. So I'd like to move on to the final voices from South Africa. Luyanda, Eva, and Ntoa, are you here? We are running out of time we are delayed significantly, so it'd be great if you could be and concise about the voices from the ground in South Africa experiences. Thank you. Luyanda, Eva, Amantoa.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm with Luyanda and Mantra. This is Eva speaking. So we're not gonna do a presentation. We're just gonna talk about the way EPR started in South Africa and how is it going now and how did it benefit the reclaimers and the challenges that we are even facing even today.
So I'm Mandra. Here in South Africa, we have worked with academics in order to interrupt the language of business and government on EPR and the integration for the understanding of reclaimers. The way it was easy to our input and recommendation, we had a pilot that we designed as Arrow on how to pay the service fee. That way, we were able to advise on research-driven information. So ever since the EPR was introduced, 9,000 reclaimers are on the registration system, but only the 10% of them have been paid, and it was a once-off thing. It was in last year when SAWPA organized the march in August, where they handed over the memorandum to the department, PROs, and the city of Joburg. Then in December 2024, ARO opened the criminal case against the PROs. Then afterwards, that's when the negotiations started, and the proper payment system was found where the reclaimers will get paid. As for the guidelines, most municipalities don't follow, and there is no inclusion of reclaimers or working relationship on the waste management system. Reclaimers are being treated like outcasts in the working spaces, and they are called names and homeless.
Thank you. This is Luanda. The process in South Africa has had a quick traction, but there's a lot of loopholes. It seems as if the informal sector is more organized compared to the different other sectors. For example, PROs don't make agreements amongst themselves. So when we are engaging, we are talking to PROs in different platforms. For example, the electronic waste has its own PROs who don't agree with the plastic and packaging PROs. And that makes the process difficult. We had to find funding from producers to be able to finance the pilot programs on how to do integration, on how the payment methods would work. That was the only way we can be able to prove. So we were the only ones that had a mechanism that had research-driven information and data of how to pay reclaimers a service fee. So the reason why they adopted our model is because we're the only ones that had a model. Business did not have model. PROs did not have a model, and the government did not have a model. But only waste pickers were the ones that have a model that was proven and it had research on it. So it was easy to adopt and be able to implement that model. And to able to get the PROs to start funding the payment method was very difficult. As in the PRO Alliance, there was only 4 PROs that were active and funding it. In South Africa, there's more than 155 plastic and packaging PROs, but we had agreements with 4 PROs. So the funding was not enough to do registration for the whole country. Hence, we only did 9,000 registration. But in return, we ourselves as the claim organizations went and found funding with the World Bank to continue the registration without the PROs and without government. So most of the process was done by us because there was no urgency from the PROs. There was no urgency also from government. The situation right now is that we were forced to bring producers in the table when we are speaking to PROs to hold them accountable, so they can commit to funding the process and implementing the payment method. The payment of wage pickers hasn't been happening for 3 years now, mainly because PROs are not as organized as we are. We agree on policy, we agree on paper, but when it comes to having them to be able to fund it, it's not happening. Only when we had to bring the producers, that is when they were able to agree and actually comply. I have to emphasize the importance of having the government to be holding PROs accountable is very important. Government needs to play a role of enforcement so that everything that is being agreed on is implemented. Thank you very much.
And as to put more words on what Mandla and Brianda has said, this has really helped us to make sure that we fight for the rights of reclaimers and they get proper recognition. As they've said that most PROs, they don't care about the reclaimers, but they keep on collecting the money from the producers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's very interesting to hear the experience in South Africa, that the payment is a little bit difficult to be received by the waste pickers due to the policy and structures at the moment. I think these are really described into the case studies, I think. So maybe I'd like to move on to the Taylor. Maybe would you like to say one word on the launch of the case studies?
Thank you now, and thanks to my colleagues, waste picker colleagues from around the world. Just to wrap it up, as the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, we advocate for a just transition for all workers. But we also know that if solutions aren't developed with and for waste pickers, then they tend to be left behind as systems formalize. The most important financing partners for us tends to be municipalities as well, increasingly as the private sector. So for us, policies like extended producer responsibility are really critical because in most cases, we are still seeing these policies don't adequately account for workers in the informal economy, despite that they're hugely transformational to our industry. And we also see that successful worker organizing is perhaps the single most important factor for waste pickers to secure financing and decent work. At the global level, as we negotiate multilateral environmental agreements that do have impact at the local level, like the still draft Global Plastics Treaty, we have to continue to insist that finance mechanisms facilitate funding that reaches the local level and that can be accessible to groups like waste pickers. We look to some recent research that the organization Tier Fund consulted us in conducting and believe that we can probably get the best outcomes from a new independent fund under these mechanisms. That's something that is adequately resourced, drawing from private and public sources, and which is focused on ensuring equitable and dedicated access, including for waste pickers and their local partners. So only time and advocacy will tell if the global finance mechanisms coming out will really work for waste pickers. But in the meantime, I just want to say how grateful we are for your interest and support in our ongoing efforts to ensure that no worker is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the International Alliance of Waste Pickers and then also Taylor for the nice wrap up. Now I'd like to move on to panel discussion. We are significantly delayed, however, bear with us to stay here a little longer than at 4:30. I'd like to invite Swati. Hi Swati, are you here? As a moderator for the panel discussion. Great. So over to you, Swati, and then also over to you, all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much now, and trust I'm audible. I'll skip the introductions of speakers, and maybe I'll introduce you all briefly as I take the questions. This is Swati Singh Sandyal. I'm a senior circular economy and partnerships expert at GRID-Arendal. My first question is for Kunapong Kunaraksa, who's the Senior Director of Circular Initiatives. He heads the Responsible Sourcing Initiative Indonesia project, which addresses plastic pollution and human rights challenges in the country. Kunapong, UN Habitat noted that operational waste management costs must rise significantly to prevent open dumping and acknowledge informal recycling efforts. Yet, many municipalities lack the funds to collect all waste. In such contexts, what funding sources could sustainably support a just and inclusive plastic circular economy? Over to you, Kun.
Thank you, Swati. Before I share a little bit about the funding sources, just want to touch a little bit on, in many emerging markets, as waste collection is scaled, the collection cost rises, as you mentioned, and it places pressure on municipalities and local waste management ecosystem. According to the OECD, focusing on low and middle income countries where there is significant opportunity to curb mismanaged waste, approximately about $28 billion per year is needed to finance building this basic waste management infrastructure. So what can this investment do, right? Greater investment can support the development of resilient, inclusive local waste management ecosystem in a couple ways. For example, vertical integration of local recycling companies to formalize and strengthen collection. Secondly, investment can support to scale social and private enterprises with innovative, inclusive waste collection models. So going back to your question about funding sources, to drive investment to these solutions, capital can come from different sources. One could be growth and patient capitals for emerging and early stage solution. Secondly, could be catalytic capital for solutions that are developed by social enterprises and similar organizations that are not set up for accepting equity investment. Thirdly, the private sector can help to build strong pipeline of businesses, helping entrepreneurs get funding, grow, scale their business, and supporting capacity building and training on responsible sourcing practices. And lastly, innovative financial mechanism like blended finance, using catalytic capital from both public and philanthropy sources can increase private sector investment in this sustainable development and also can reduce risk and encourage more investment.
Thank you so much, Kun, for keeping it brief and for sharing your insights. I will probably ask the same question to Christina Yeager, who's the co-founder of Yunus Environment Hub. Christina, what funding sources could sustainably support a just and inclusive plastic circular economy? Over to you. Christina, you're here?
Sorry, I was speaking while I was muted. Apologies. Hi, everyone. Regarding your question, I would say that funding sources must come from a combination of innovative, diversified sources that reflect the shared responsibility of all stakeholders in the plastics value chain. And first and foremost, I want to highlight that the most important funding source must come from extended producer responsibility schemes. We must mandate that producers bear the financial and/or the operational responsibility for the end-of-life management of their plastic products. This will create a consistent funding stream by internalizing waste management costs into product pricing. And if the EPR scheme is designed inclusively, we can have a well-designed EPR that can formally recognize and compensate informal waste pickers, for example, through service contracts or cooperatives. So I think this is the number one. I think this is also something where we're all looking at the Global Plastics Treaty that is being negotiated, that this will really be a driver for enforcing EPR schemes and making this the main source of funding. A second way can come through the waste fees that municipalities are collecting by structuring the fee structures differently. Instead of having fixed fees per head, moving to a flexible waste fee calculation that is based on volumes or amounts, where you can achieve two objectives. First, it incentivizes to actually reduce waste, because if you have less waste, then you also pay less. And secondly, you can use this as a mechanism to cross-subsidize higher fees for higher waste generators that can then subsidize waste services in informal settlements or support informal sector integration. A third way, and this is also very important, and I think not enough discussed, is we need to have further measurements that incentivize waste prevention. And from a policy level and funding level, this can be done through plastic taxes, environmental levies, where a part of the revenue can be ring-fenced for social inclusion programs. For example, waste picker formalization or social security. And then I want to mention public-private partnerships. This is especially relevant in waste infrastructure, where private sector investment can incentivize, through guarantees, co-financing, and concessional terms, higher investments. And an example to make this inclusive is, for example, co-financing a material recovery facility that integrates informal workers. And then lastly, I want to mention private philanthropy and impact investors that can fund inclusive circular economy programs that have social and environmental returns as their primary objectives by, for example, investing into social businesses. Scalability of this alone is limited, but very powerful for pilots and for bridging gaps. And in the end, it's again, as I said, it needs to be a mixture of all of these different funding sources.
Thank you so much, Christina. My next question is for Ashish Chaturvedi. He's the Head of Action for Climate and Environment at UNDP India. Ashish, in all the three case studies, waste pickers have limited access to fair wages and social protection and often absorb financial shortfalls. From your vast experience, what policy guidance is needed to design effective mechanisms and financial incentives that guarantee fair compensation? And what is needed in this context to enable a just transition? Over to you.
Thanks, Swati, for having me, and well, honored to be listening to a lot of the experiences shared thus far. So I'd like to, well, given the paucity of time, I'd like to sort of highlight three broad areas for policy guidance. The first one is, of course, and we've heard this already during this call also, recognition and formalizations. So policies that formally recognize waste pickers' role in waste management systems and create the foundation for fair compensation. This has been the experience in India, the example of Swatch, but also the other examples that we heard thus far. And legal recognition as service providers rather than informal workers is critical. And I think this is one of the challenges that we've faced in the past. But I think now there is a fair amount of momentum, and I think we should build upon that momentum. The second point is about inclusive EPR systems. EPR needs to explicitly calculate and allocate funds. We've heard this before. Some of my co-panelists are already talking about it. For waste picker compensation based on actual collection volumes and service value, not just lowest cost calculations. And there are various ways of doing it. So of course, regulation can actually impose it, but then voluntary action on responsible sourcing and other areas could actually come in here as well. And the third sort of area where, for instance, in India, this is already piloted for agriculture, for smallholder farmers, setting up of price floor mechanisms that protect against market volatility, particularly for recyclable materials, and thereby providing economic stability. For enabling a just transition, I think one of the critical things, and there are learnings from the just energy transition work that's happening in the sort of parts of India as well, but other parts of the world, skill development programs, so training in waste handling safety, material sorting, and entrepreneurial skills will enable waste pickers to increase earnings and move into higher value roles. The second point being social protection integration. I work in India. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has an exclusive program for targeting the waste pickers. And of course, they want to now expand it. So formal inclusion in social security, health insurance, and pension systems is critical for long-term security. The third point on just transition is about cooperative formation support. How do you collectivize? How do you bring sort of these disparate entities together? So legal and technical assistance for establishing cooperatives, increasing collective bargaining power, and also sort of enhancing service delivery capacity. And finally, on technology access, I think we really need to spend time thinking about what are appropriate technologies that enhance efficiency without displacing labor, and that can improve working conditions and earnings of the informal sector as well. So these are my initial thoughts, and happy to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Very valuable insights. And I now move forward to Mike. Mike Webster is the director at Systemic. Mike, coming back to the first question, what funding sources could sustainably support a just and inclusive plastic circular economy? Over to you.
Thanks. So I mean, look, there's a variety of funding sources, but I mean, I think obviously people are kind of, historically looking at EPR system, extended producer responsibility systems for funding these. But given the the public benefit that informal recycling sector often provides, there is, I think, a solid argument for looking at some kind of recycling credits in terms of the funded by municipalities and kind of benefit there. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Emmy, the last question is for you. From your experience at NEVA, what policy guidance is needed to design effective mechanisms and financial incentives that guarantee fair compensation? Over to you.
Thank you, Swati. I think the first step is to recognize that just transition can't be defined from the top down, and that it must be shaped by the people and communities that are most affected by plastic pollution, as well as the measures that we are discussing to address it. And that these frontline communities are the ones who know what just transition means in their context. And I also think it could be relevant to mention the living income methodology developed by the Fair Circularity Initiative and Systemic in consultation with waste picker representatives, which may offer a starting point for defining fair compensation. However, I think we also need to recognize that financial benchmarks alone aren't enough. We also need to recognize health risks, occupational hazards, and long-term exposures, which are harder to quantify, but also must be addressed. And then I also want to mention the valuable resources developed by the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, which provides evidence-based and policy-relevant insights on how just transition and EPR can look like in practice from the perspective of waste pickers. And I think in addition to waste pickers who are indeed central to this conversation, other workers and communities across the plastic value chain also have views on what just transition should look like. So I think we need a process that listens across contexts while making sure the most marginalized voices remain at the center of policy design and financial decision making.
Thank you so much, Amy. I will now hand over to Now for a brief summary, and not sure now if there's space for question and answers, but over to you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that there's a really rich conversation really coming from this webinar. There's lots of I still feel that there's a lot of knowledge gap in terms of what are the fair compensation is, and then what are the sources of financial resources. There are lots of things, but maybe in terms of the ability of those financial sources to really cater for all the real cost of the recycling might not be really fully mapped out. And then but there are so many important aspects for the just transitions were mentioned. However, that I still feel that there's a lot of knowledge gaps in terms of where the money is coming from to really cater for such a lot of all these conditions for the just transition to be successful. And then I think we have a lot of questions at the moment from here, but due to the fact that we have already over the time, we'd like to collect all those questions, and then we'd like to share any questions towards all the registered participants today. And thank you very much for your participation, and I think we can actually see a way forward, how to bring this discussion towards the sustainable financing of the just transition of the plastic circular economy and then value chain establishment towards the Global Plastic Treaty. So with this note, I'd like to close this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today, and keep in touch. Thank you so much.